Hi guys, this is Marius from Trademate Sports, and today I'm going to do a video where I explain how bookmakers make money and what it means for you as a sports bettor. The fundamental business model of bookmakers is that they accept bets on different outcomes of different sporting events. For example, Manchester City is playing versus Manchester United this week, and if you go to different bookmaker pages, you will see that bookmakers offer different odds on the same game. Is that there are differing opinions as to what the probability is for either the home or away team to win or the draw. So bookmakers make money by having a certain margin on each bet that is placed through their service. This is then multiplied by the number of bets that come through their platform, which is again multiplied by the amount of money that is bet on the different games. This is then equal to the profits that the bookmakers are left with. Now, bookmakers, they offer odds on thousands of games in multiple different sports. But on each and every single of these games, they make sure that they have a mathematical edge against the player. This is what people will talk about when they're saying that the house has an edge in a casino game and that the house always wins. This is because the house has made sure that they have a mathematical edge versus the players. Otherwise, they would not have a very successful business model. So what they do is that they offer odds that is too low than what they believe that the real probabilities are. If a bookmaker believes that there is a 50% chance of Manchester City winning versus United, they will offer an odds that is lower than 2.0 in order to give themselves a margin. Odds is just a different way of writing probability, and the relationship between them is that the odds is equal to the inverse of the probability. So for instance, if 2 in odds is the equivalent of a 50% probability for that outcome to occur. So you divide 1 by 2 and then you get 0.5, which is equal to 50%. Now, there are tons of different services that allow you to compare odds between different bookmakers out there. The majority of them are also free. So I went to one of them and I dug out the odds for Manchester City versus Man United from both a European bookmaker and also from an Asian bookmaker. And what we can see here is that the two different bookmakers have different odds on the home, draw, and away. They also have different payout rates or different margins. Now, payout rates and margins are two different ways of describing the same thing, depending on which point of view you're looking at it from. So the bookmaker, in this case, the European bookmaker, has a margin of 6.78%. This means that out of every $100 that is bet on this game, $93.22 are paid out to the players. So the bookmaker keeps $6.78 for themselves. This is their margin. And the payout rate is just how much money is paid back to the players once this bet is settled. Now, as you can see, the Asian bookmaker, they differ in terms of the odds that they're offering. So, for instance, they offer higher odds on the home team to win. They offer much higher odds for the draw, and they also offer a higher odds for the away team to win. Why is this the case? How can these Asian bookmakers take such low margin compared to some of the European bookmakers? How can they operate this way? And this really comes down to them having different business models, which we'll dig into next. Each and every bet that is placed through a bookmaker, they have a certain margin on that game. Now this is multiplied by the turnover and gives them a profit. So turnover can further be broken down into the number of bets times the amount bet. A bookmaker makes a profit by having a certain margin on each game, independent of which outcomes the players bet on. Now, because the bookmakers give themselves this margin of safety, what it means is that in order for a player to be profitable in the long term, they need to have an edge against the house. How you find these edges, that's a discussion for another day, but the point still remains that in order to beat the house, you need to find a mathematical edge. How do the bookmakers come up with these odds? How do they decide that the odds or the probability of Manchester City to win is 54% and the probability of Manchester United to win is 23.81% and so on? Well, some of the bookmakers calculate their odds in-house, so they have odds experts who look at a bunch of different factors and then they come up with a number that they're comfortable with as the probability of this team winning. Now, how exactly they do calculate these probabilities, that will differ between from bookmaker to bookmaker and from between the different odds experts as well. Some of the factors they take into consideration could be the team's lineups, whether or not there are any injuries to the teams, their position in the league table, how well have they been playing lately, are they on a winning streak, losing streak, etc. So the point with this is not to say exactly which factors and how they weight these factors in order to come up with these probabilities. It's just to point out that there are a lot of different ways to do it, and these are some of the potential inputs that goes into these models. Now, because there are so many different ways to do this, I mean, you can think of so many different factors that might have an impact on the teams. You know, there's been statistics showing that teams are more likely to win at home than away, so that should probably factor into your model. Also, how well do the teams play? If the field is more slippery because it's raining, that might lead to more goals. So there's so many factors, and deciding exactly which of them have an impact and how much impact they have is really difficult. But the good thing about it is that it means that there are a lot of different opinions on how to calculate these probabilities. So this is why you'll see that different bookmakers have different odds. They have different opinions on what they believe the underlying probabilities are. But what they all have in common is that they will take a margin on the different outcomes of the games. What I want to touch upon next is some of the differences between the European bookmakers and the Asian bookmakers. Because as we saw in the example of Man City versus Manchester United, the European bookmaker example had different odds to the Asian bookmakers and in general had a lot lower payout rates, or in other words, a higher margin. So basically what this comes down to is that the European and the Asian bookmakers operate with different business models. One way to describe it would be to say that the European bookmakers are position takers. They typically have in-house odds teams that decide that we believe that this team is going to win and we believe that this is the probability of this team winning. While the Asian bookmakers, on the other hand, are more book balancers. So they just want to take in a very large amount of bets and a very large amount of money, and then in order to reduce their liability, for instance, if $1 million is bet on Manchester City winning, they will hedge that out by either shifting their odds to attract more potential bettors to put money on Manchester United, or they can lay off the bets at an exchange or other bookmakers. So let's say that both of these bookmakers want to make a $1 million profit. Now, because they operate with different business models, there are different ways of them achieving this $1 million in profit. The example I like to use here is to compare the Asian bookmakers to a company selling soda and the European bookmakers to a company selling whiskey. So if you're selling soda, you can sell like millions of sodas and only have a margin of $1 on each soda you sell, and then you're making $1 million. While if you're selling 30-year-old whiskey, let's say the margin on each bottle of whiskey is $100,000. Then you need to sell only 10 bottles in order to reach 1 million profits. So this is like the basic difference. The Asian bookmakers operate by having low margins, but a higher turnover, while the European bookies operate by having a higher margin, but they have a lower turnover. Next, we'll dig a bit into some of the differences between the European bookmakers and the Asian bookmakers. Right, so the European bookmakers, they have a higher margin, but they have a lower turnover compared to the Asians. The reason that the Asian bookmakers have this higher turnover is that they allow sharp traders to bet through their platforms. Now, to attract the sharp traders, they also offer higher maximum stakes. So this means that the sharpest bettors in the world and the betting syndicates will do all of their bets through the Asian bookmakers, because the maximum stakes that European ones offer are too low for it to be feasible for them. Even the best like betting syndicates and sports bettors and traders and everything will only have low ROI per bet. So in order for them to make thousands in profits, they need to have a turnover in the hundred thousands. If they want to make a profit of millions, they need to have a turnover of 100 million. And if they want to have a profit of 100 million, they need to have a turnover of billions. And so it adds up. Another difference between them is that the most common odds type at European bookmakers is the 1x2, so basically the home draw and away. While at the Asian bookmakers, they typically remove the draw and use what are known as Asian handicaps. So instead of the draw being a possibility, they will, for instance, give a team a +1 handicap, and if it ends in a draw, then that team with the +1 handicap will still win. Now, because the Asian bookmakers are almost purely market-driven, their odds will change much more frequently, because as they're constantly trying to balance the books, we'll get in a large bet on one side, which will cause the odds to drop, and then it goes up on the other side, just like a lever, basically. And in these markets, you have all these sharp traders, so they're constantly looking for value in the market. So if they believe that the Man City win is currently undervalued, they'll place bets on that line, forcing that odds to drop. And so the odds on a Manchester United win will increase, and now there might be a different sharp trader out there with a different model, and according to his model, the Manchester United is now the undervalued team. So they'll place bets on Manchester United to win, and so the odds on United will drop and the odds on City will increase. And this will keep going all the way until the game starts, and then finally it will reach sort of an equilibrium where everyone's happy with the current prices. And this is when we say that the market is efficient. This is also why we say that markets are more efficient closer to kickoff than they are early on, because at this point in time, more money will have moved through the market. So you could view it as that money equals information, because if you don't know what you're doing and the stakes are as high as they are in the Asian market, where it takes $10,000 to move the odds from 2.0 to 1.99. What you will also see is that these different forms of running a bookmaker, they cater to different customers. So the European bookmakers are, to a larger degree, targeting the average Joe that just wants to place some bets on his favorite team to win this weekend and doesn't think very much about the odds that they're getting offered. So this means that the bookmakers can get away with charging odds that are poor value where they have a higher margin, while the sharp traders or bettors will be a lot more price sensitive, so they will only bet when they get really good odds and they believe that there is value in this odds. And another way that the European bookmakers have made sure that they don't attract the sharp bettors is because the limits they have on the different games are a lot lower than on the Asian bookmakers. On the Asian bookmakers, on a Premier League game, you'll be able to place a maximum bet of several $1,000s up to like $100,000, while at one of the European bookmakers, the max bet might just be $100 to $1,000. And if a bettor proves to be profitable in the long term, the European bookmakers will also target these players and limit them by only allowing them to bet very small amounts. Now, as I mentioned earlier, because if you want to make a profit in the thousands, you need a turnover in the tens of thousands to the hundreds of thousands. And if you're only allowed to place like $5 on a game, you're gonna need a very, very high volume of bets in order to get there. So it becomes very unattractive for the sharp bettors.